Now here's a cartoon that's probably not crossed your mind in decades. Mike, Lou, and Og was one of Cartoon Network's original animated shows from the late 90s and early 2000s, better known as the Cartoon Cartoons. Shows that included Dexter's Laboratory, the Powerpuff Girls, Ed, Ed and Eddie, and so many more. But while those cartoons remain well remembered even today, Mike, Lou, and Og seems to have barely received any passing recognition. Running for only 26 half-hour episodes around the turn of the century, this cartoon is among the most forgotten in Cartoon Network's litany of original programming. Deservedly so? Let's take a closer look at it and see. In viewing the show, you may notice that the character designs and animation style appear to be derived from that of Klasky Csupo, the animation studio behind series like Rugrats, The Wild Thornberrys, and others. So you might be thinking that this was a show of theirs. Actually, Mike, Lou, and Og was produced via collaboration between two different studios. Kinofilm in Los Angeles and Pilot Studios in Moscow. Pilot Studios was apparently the first independent and privately owned animation studio in the Soviet Union, while Kinofilm was founded in part by a Russian immigrant. So Mike, Lou, and Og is, in part, a product of Russian origin. However, this appears to be the only major production undertaken by either company. With regards to what other projects these two studios produced and what their current statuses are, I couldn't really find out very much. What exactly was the show about? Well, it was set on an island in the Pacific called Algonquin, where, as is stated in the theme song, nobody goes. The main protagonist of the show is a girl named Mike, short for Michelle Ann Mazinski, a young girl from Manhattan voiced by Nika Futterman, who applied as a foreign exchange student to this weird island. There, she meets two young island natives close to her in age named Lou and Og. The series showcased their exploits on and around the island. Most commonly, the primary focus of the show was Mike attempting to make the island more like her native Manhattan, introducing the Algonquinians to more modern amenities. So we'd see things like a high-rise, a television set, or roller skates being ushered into the island's environment. The main person who helped Mike do this was Og, the quiet intellectual among the natives.
The future of television is bleak.
Speaking in a gravelly voice supplied by D. Bradley Baker, Og was responsible for inventing the variety of devices and comforts Mike had in New York. Everything from a television set to a handheld video game was a convenience that Og was capable of creating. In a way, he was sort of like the professor on Gilligan's Island, only he wasn't trying to help everybody escape the island. They were all content to live there, despite the island's volcanoes and tendency to sink and rise up again every century or so. Lou, Og's cousin and the second of the three title characters, was quite the opposite. She was a loud and arrogant young girl with a princess complex. Picture Angelica from Rugrats as a Pacific Islander.
I want to ride an elephant!
I suppose it was only fitting for her to be voiced by Nancy Cartwright, best known for voicing a spoiled kid in that other show. You know, that show that's been airing on Fox for decades. That show with the bug-eyed, yellow-skinned people. The Waltons! Anyway, Lou declared herself the royal personage and had a habit of making a nuisance out of herself, demanding everyone's attention. Bearing the brunt of her torment was her pet tortoise.
Lancelot!
Just as Angelica had Cynthia, Lou had Lancelot. Though a long-suffering character, Lancelot showed he had a greater level of competence than Lou. In some cases, he would actually come to the character's rescue in troubling times. So, in a way, his name was actually quite fitting. Since Mike was the odd one out of the group, and the lion's share of episodes focused on her, it begs the question, why call the show Mike, Lou, and Og? Lou's and Og's roles in the show were largely secondary in comparison to Mike's. Having their names in the show's title didn't convey the fish-out-of-water premise the show had. I think that a more fitting name for the show would have helped get its concept across more appropriately. I don't know, maybe call it something like Mike's Island Adventures or Island Girl. Island Girl! Oh, right, this show had nothing to do with that Elton John song of the same name. Well, let's take a look at some of the other characters, shall we? The inhabitants of the island are descended from the survivors of a British shipwreck that occurred sometime in the 1700s. Over time, these inhabitants evidently decided to incorporate some island customs into their traditional British culture. So they act like sort of a cross between Pacific Islanders and high-class British aristocrats, I guess. Strange that they keep their lofty ways and incorporate a more primitive Polynesian lifestyle, but it's all part of the show's idiosyncrasy.
How simply marvelous!
Given that the adults on the show all spoke with British accents, it makes you wonder how Lou and Og both wound up speaking with American ones. There's no way they could have picked that up from anyone on the island, nor could they have picked that up from Mike, who's new to the place. It's one of those unexplained mysteries regarding this show's dynamics. The other characters on this show are a variety of quirky individuals with their own sets of interests. Queeks, the oldest of the Algonquinians, seemed to be most adept at living the native lifestyle. He acted as a sort of witch doctor and claimed to be a soothsayer with psychic abilities. Though Mike quickly saw through this latter claim, the rest of the islanders treated him with reverence and remained oblivious to that revelation. With this supposed infinite wisdom, you wonder why Queeks didn't act as the island's ruler. Well, that role fell to our next character. Lou's father, Wendell, acts as the island's governor. Seeing the kind of kid Lou was, and knowing that Wendell was her father, gives us a good indication as to his leadership style and parenting ability.
Lou, it's springtime, please!
No!
But...
Go away!
A real doormat, isn't he? Og's parents, though more steadfast and confident than Wendell, were no less unusual. While his mother Marjorie was into sculpting, cooking, and other artistic endeavors, his father Alfred largely spent his time hunting the ever-elusive wombat on the island with his suction cup arrows. If you've watched plenty of Looney Tunes or Merry Melodies as a kid, you can understand the relationship that these two had. Mike, Lou, and Og as a whole seem to take quite a bit of inspiration from those classic shorts, as many episodes showed a bit of this influence. And just as Looney Tunes had numerous animals with clever intuition, Mike, Lou, and Og had no shortage of this either. I've already mentioned Lancelot, but he wasn't the only one. When Og wasn't busy inventing stuff to help Mike feel more at home on the island, he was meeting with the characters from Pearls Before Swine? No, wait, they're not that crudely drawn. Actually, these three were, along with Og, members of the Secret Philosophical Society. Unlike Lancelot, Pig, Goat, and Spiny, bet you can't tell who's who, were actually capable of fluent speech. But this was a fact that was only known to Og.
I move we change the name of this organization to the Socratic Society.
I object! As a staunch supporter of the greatest philosopher of all time, Frederick W. Nietzsche, I find the Socratic reference absolutely, positively, what's the word?
Reprehensible.
Stinky!
They weren't lacking in intelligence either. I'm telling you, if they wanted to, the animals on this show could have started an uprising and formed a nation of their own. Though, because they're all philosophy buffs, I think there might have been a dispute amongst them concerning the moral implications of such an uprising. There's an idea for an episode right there. Too bad this show's been over for 20 years now. Mike, Lou, and Og has faded from the memories of most every millennial Cartoon Network viewer. I'm not sure many people born after 1994 would remember it at all. Its short run becomes understandable when you consider that more exciting programs were available on the same channel even at the time it was airing. Mike, Lou, and Og wasn't as innovative as Dexter's Laboratory, it wasn't as action-packed as the Powerpuff Girls, or even as offbeat as Ed, Edd and Eddy. That being said, I don't think it was a bad show. Even among the cartoons, there were worse shows out there. In being a show for kids, I thought it hit all the right marks. There was enough charm to most of the characters, and the stories were humorous and enjoyable for the most part. Not every cartoon needs to be flashy and in your face in terms of content. If you have kids of your own, this wouldn't be a bad toon from your own childhood to show them. It might be a bit hard to find these days, being such an obscure show. I don't know if Mike, Lou, and Og is still airing on networks like Boomerang or available on any streaming service either. I found it difficult to find clips from this show online and research it myself. Based on what I did find, though, I think Mike, Lou, and Og was a decent cartoon that did well to entertain me and a few others at a young age. In fact, I could see this show's premise being redone in a way to entertain today's kids. There's enough potential with the concept, and given the right writers and artists, it could be an even bigger hit. Who knows? Maybe the adventures of Mike, Lou, and Og could attract a new generation of viewers. The strange peoples on the island of El Bonquitine may have a chance for better recognition.
On the island, pretty island, where nobody goes. Palm tree in the sky, fish are jumping high. It's an island where no